All right, looks like we're up and running and live. Phil Pendlebury here. Hope you're doing well and having a super mega large day. And for any visitors from the Middle East, assalamu alaikum, marhaba. Good to have you with us. Right, so today we're going to have a look, or what we call a deep dive, into the Nuendo MixConsole. It's an often overlooked feature. It's, you know, the mixer, but there's so many features that I'd really like to show you. I'm going to try and go through every single feature of the MixConsole. And of course, the basics, most of you will already know, faders and pan pots and so on. But there will be some things, hopefully, that we can highlight that you may have missed or not even ever bothered, to consider. Now we have 4 separate MixConsoles that can all be configured separately, plus kind of a 5th one which is in the lower zone. I don't tend to use that very often. I'm going to show you that anyway. And we'll just go through it all. I've got a little bit of audio, so we might want to put headphones on, but it's not super important, to be honest, today with the audio side, because it's mostly showing you through the features. Let me just have a quick look down at my notes here. Yeah, towards the end, hopefully, if we've got time, I'm going to show you a little bit about the differences with the MixConsole when we're mixing Dolby Atmos. I've already done a video on that. So just a quick little, thing about that. What else have we got here that I may have missed? Always good to take notes when you're live, because as you know, if anybody's ever done this, when you're streaming live, you tend to drop a few IQ points and the memory goes, so it's good to have stuff written down. So I like to think of the mixer as having 3 main sections. I'll show you that in a minute. And I suppose we should just dive into it, to be honest. Let's go and have a look at what we've got set up here. Right, so here's my project, and what I'm going to do is I've got a kind of mix. I'm going to use MixConsole 1 out of the 4. There'll be some bits to show you in a while to do with that, the different consoles. What I'm going to do is try and zoom in on this and show it in as much detail as possible. A little bit tricky zooming in and out while we're live, but I'll try my best. So like I said, I like to think of the MixConsole as having 3 kind of main sections. From bottom to top, we've got obviously the faders and the fader section and panning and so on at the bottom. The middle area, which includes the rack and all the other displays and so on. And then we have the upper toolbars, which we're going to start with actually in a second. So we're going to go through every section bit by bit and hopefully try and reveal some of the hidden secrets of the MixConsole. So let's turn off the camera and get moving. Right, so headphones on just in case we want to listen to a bit of audio. And I'll just tell you quickly what Steinberg say about the MixConsole. So the MixConsole provides a common environment for producing mixes in stereo or surround. It allows you to control level, pan, solo, mute status, etc. for audio and MIDI channels. Furthermore, you can set up the input and output routing for multiple tracks or channels at the same time. You can undo, redo MixConsole parameters, changes, or for any open project at any time. So that's Steinberg's info on the MixConsole, which actually is quite limited really, because there's a lot more to it than that. So let's, first of all, what I'm going to do here, I've got this set up because I just wanted to show you it at the intro, but we'll zoom in. So hopefully now that's filling your entire screen, even though it's not my entire screen. We do need to quickly mention this. I had a couple of people mention, oh, why are you streaming in 4K and so on and so forth? Well, because I like to have the quality and I like to have the ability to zoom in and out with a very high resolution. So as you can see now, if I go back to my main size of my screen, you can see the full screen there, which is how I'm seeing it. But what I'm going to do today, like I said, is keep it zoomed in. I have a few automatic features set up that enable me to zoom in and out as well, and also to show the menu, although we won't be using much of that today. Right, so as you can see at the moment, I've got the MixConsole and it's quite full, it's quite busy. So what I'm going to do first is just turn everything off here, which we will do here. Don't worry about this because we're going to go through this in detail in a second. So that's a mix console as it appears in its basic form. So let's just minimize that for a second. Let's make sure the audio is working. So what we've got here is basically just a little bit of music on a loop. I've got a couple of MIDI tracks, which, you know, like I said, we don't really need to worry about too much today. And I've got some audio tracks, and then there'll be some other types of track that appear in a second. So first of all, let's go back out to the full screen and turn my camera off. So first thing I want to show you is about the lower zone. So if I switch back to my full screen, again, we're zoomed out at the moment, so things might look a little bit tiny to you, but not to worry, because I'm just going to show you this very, very quickly. So opening the mixer in the lower zone, we just go up here into the top right corner and we can show the lower zone. You can see we've got a very kind of basic mixer there. We can also show different sections of the mixer, but it doesn't go into quite as much detail as the main mixers do. So we're not going to worry too much about that at the moment. If you look at the three little dots here as well in the corner, you have a toolbar with some basic features. But like I said, we'll go through those features when looking at the main mixer, which has more things included. Some people like to use the lower zone. There's obviously other things that you can do in the lower zone as well. The MIDI remote exists there, as do, you know, the sampler control and the editor. Although I've got nothing displaying on that at the moment. So, all right, so that's enough really on the lower zone. We can also pull it out and you know, put it wherever we want. So what I'm going to do is we'll close up the lower zone for now, and we'll just work how I would normally work. So I'm going to bring up the main mixer, or one of them, and we'll zoom back in. So let's get stuck in. So the first thing I want to show you is setting up the toolbar at the top here. Excuse me while I have a little sip of water. So as you can see, we have a toolbar along the top here. Now I've got this mixer kind of cut down a little bit so it fits into my pre-zoomed screen area. And as you can see, it's getting quite cluttered. There's lots of things there. And if I expand it out so that you can see more of it, you can see you can add so many features onto the toolbar. So what I want to do first is just show you how we can trim that down a little bit. So you've got all the features here. Again, we're going to go through these all in detail in a second. But what I want to do is just quickly show you how we can set that up. So if we just move the mixer over a little bit so that you can see me dropping down the toolbar and you can see all the items. If we go to setup, and we can actually zoom in a little bit more maybe on that, you can see all the visible items here on the right. So for instance, what we're looking at now, we don't really need to see the transport controls because I've got those in other parts of the window, so we can, for instance, get the transport and remove them. We don't need to see markers, we don't really need to see the state buttons, etc., etc. And you know, we can move as many of these things as we like, put them over into the hidden items area over here. And then if we just go back, now I'll just recenter this, you can see that we've got a nicely cut down kind of toolbar at the top. So one of the things is, well, okay, you know, that's nice, but I don't want to have to mess around doing that every time, which you don't, because what we can do, you can see, again, this is tricky because the actual menu system is opening off of the zoom, so I'm going to have to move it over again. You can see here that we've got presets. So at the moment, when we first opened up, I was on my fill all preset. And then if we do the cut down version, you can see that that is now cut down. So I've basically got rid of all the transport and all the things that I don't really want to see. So how do we do that? Once again, just open up. Once you've decided what you want to see, we'll go to Setup. You can move everything across, do what you want to do with that, get rid of all the irrelevant stuff, and then there's a preset drop down here, which you can then save, remove, rename, etc. And at the moment, I've just got two. I want my fill all, which is everything on, and then I want my cut down version, which has got rid of basically most of the transport. So if I put that in action, that's probably what we're going to use mostly today, although we might switch back. Now, just while we're at it, I'm going to zoom back out again, and I'm going to show you my main mixer, which should be mixer number 3. And if I go to that now and just make sure that I've got everything, you can see that all the mixers kind of follow each other at the moment. They're all syncing together. So we will just put that back down to cut down and leave it at that for now. So we're in the cut down version of the toolbar, and as you can see, it's nice and clean, and there's only really what I consider important things. Now, it's difficult, this, because I was thinking, you know, what's going to be the best way to show this, because there's lots of features that are kind of like I'm showing you the toolbar now, but we haven't gone through what any of those items are, and so on and so forth. It's a tricky one, because where do you start? So I kind of made the decision that we'll start at the top, we'll go through the toolbar, and then we'll move down, and then you'll have a summary, and obviously later on I'll put chapter markers in so that people can skip backwards and forwards to the stuff they really want to know. Right, so camera off again, and let's move it on. Zoom back in, and just to be clear one more time, just to be clear that what I've done is I've set up this so it's removed things that I don't really consider highly relevant to the mix console itself. So the transport, the locator positions, marker positions, and all those kind of things I've removed. So what I'm going to go through here is things that I feel are kind of relevant to the mixer. Right, so let's start from over here. In the far left at the moment, we have the undo and redo buttons. They behave pretty much like any other undo and redo would do. And next to that, we have a snapshot area, which I'm going to show you in detail in a minute. One of the things I think it'd be nice to show, we've got a way to search for channels here. If you can see that, I'm just checking my screen to make sure that it's all visible. Again, standard thing, so you can see all my channels there. If you had hundreds of channels, I want to search for bass, and there you go, and it will select that channel for you. Okay, so we don't need to worry about that. Let's just get rid, and we can actually leave it selected. It doesn't matter. So the first thing that I find extremely useful is the channel visibility configurations. So I've got a few of my own here. Don't forget, as I said earlier, we've got MIDI and audio tracks all grouped together at the moment in this mixer. But you can change that. So if we look here, we've got a little drop-down list, which is a filter. So let's just turn everything on. As you can see now, we've got absolutely everything showing. We've got all the audio and all the MIDI, and actually there would be everything on there if we expanded the mixer out. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I just want to show audio only on this particular mixer. And this is the other nice thing. You can configure this for each different mixer. So we can have one mixer for audio, one for MIDI, one for groups, and one for effects, and so on, and you can switch them around once you've saved them. So let's say we only want to look at the VST instruments channels. Well, we can just turn everything off and click that, and these are only the VST instruments. So let's have a quick play. You can see there that this is the instruments only that are playing. So, all right, that's fine, but I don't want to have to fiddle about with that all the time. And this is where your configurations come in. You can set them up And what you do is you basically say, okay, you know, that's my VST instrument setup. I'm now going to save that. And we go add configuration. We type a name and off we go. And as you can see, I've got mine all set up here. VST instruments, audio only, groups, FX and groups, FX and VCAs, which there isn't any VCAs configured, so you won't see anything. And then we have inputs and outputs, depending on how you had it set when you save the configurations. So we'll leave that at all for now and move on. So yeah, very, very powerful way to, you know, sort your mixers out. Like I said, I like to have my main mixer at the bottom of the screen, for example. That would have all my groups and so on. So what I would do here is go to configurations and call that groups. There isn't a lot of groups at the moment because we've only got a tiny little project. So it's not entirely relevant, but I have my main mixer at the bottom with all the groups, and then the other mixers would be audio and VST and various different configurations depending on what I'm actually working on at the time. So hopefully you find that useful. Right, a quick drink. Next, let's see, we don't need the transport, the locators and all that stuff is not relevant at the moment. The next thing across then is the states. Pretty straightforward, I think, this one. You can see we've got solo buttons on the faders, and obviously you know that we can solo stuff on the channels themselves. We've also got the read and write automation here at the bottom. So what we can do is just globally affect that. So if you've got a track muted, and again, it's easy to see at the moment because we're looking at just, you know, a small amount of channels. But if you had a track muted and you didn't know where it was, so there's something, you know, not playing correctly, you can affect them globally on and off here. So we can just actually off really. So we can just unsolo everything. The same thing goes with listens, so we can deactivate all the listens, we can deactivate the solos, we can deactivate or activate the read and write automation, and we can suspend the automation as well. So that's nice and straightforward. Global controls of your individual states. And like I said, mute, solo, and listen are actually deactivates, because if you have nothing soloed and you try to press this, well, it's not going to know what you're trying to solo, is it? So there's no need to worry about that. So that's the state buttons. For the next bit, I think it's important to just quickly show a couple of actual. Let's put the channel rack in there for a moment. We're going to get to this bit in a second, but just let's put the channel rack in so you can actually see some channels there. So the next thing I'd like to have a quick look at is how the link system works. Really handy. So if we just want to select, let's say we want to, let's go to our MIDI drums. So this would be this, and this, and this, although I'm not sure how many of those are actually in use at the moment. Oh yeah, I do have them mixed separately. So what we can do here, okay, first of all, I want to solo all of those, but that's tricky. So what we can do is we can go to the link section here, which is the next one across. Oh, by the way, also we've got the bypass, global bypasses here for inserts and so on and so forth. Again, quite useful. But let's move on to link. So let's keep those channels selected, and we'll go to the link dialog. And we've got volume, pan, EQ, all these different things that you can set to actually be included in the link. So we'll call that drums. And what I'm going to do now is hit OK. Actually, we can even do mute, solo, and listen there as well. We can do anything we really need to, but you can save them separately as well. So let's just leave it like that for now. That's okay. We've got a little link group called drums. And as you can see now, they appear here. Those selected channels are all actually linked together, and they will stay like that. They will stay like that until we decide to remove that link. So watch what happens now. If I move the faders, they all move together. And if I solo, all those channels will solo. If I mute, all those channels will mute, and so on. Now, that's really neat, and, you know, there's uses for that. You might be thinking, well, yeah, I just like to send those to a group, and so do I. And I've got to admit, I don't use this actual full linking feature that often. So what we can do, let's just edit that. And yeah, you can see there as well that we can edit everything. But what we can do now is just unlink them and put them back how they were. And even though those channels are all selected, now we're back to normal. One more little thing as well, I think, let's just do it one more time. We'll just leave the title as link 1 to save time. One other thing you can do, if I remember rightly, you can shift and move, which will give you much more fine control. And the other thing you can do is to bypass the linking in one particular channel. I think the key is Alt, yeah. Alt for me. So if I'm holding down Alt, even though those channels are all linked together, I can actually move that individual one any way I want. Right, so let's get rid of the linking there. And yeah, sorry, here we go. Unlink selected channels. So the other one that's really handy on the linking side is the Q-Link button. So similar thing to link. Let's put those all back together and hit Q-Link. But the difference with Q-Link is that it's not saved as a group. It's not saved as a, you know, like something that you can come back to. It's just very quickly a Q-Link, a quick link. So what we want to do, we've selected all those channels. I want to quickly, you know, lower the levels, or I wanted to quickly do something with the panning of all of them. Or actually what is really handy is if you want to assign them all to the same group. So as you can see, for example, at the moment, I've got these outputs are selected to a particular group, but I actually want them all to be, and you see I just did that and they've all gone to the same group. And then of course, turn off Q-Link again. So now we're back to having our own control. And nice to have that set up on a key command, because it's something that, you know, comes in handy to do quite a lot. I have a little application that I've written that sends certain key commands that's quite handy, and also some macro keys, and there's various ways of doing that. But it's just handy to be able to go, okay, quick link, let's quickly, you know, we select those channels, quick link, let's just do that, and then quick link off again, and we're back to normal. Right, so moving on. Widths and heights, well, that's pretty obvious. We can increase the channel widths here, and we can reduce, and of course the heights as well. So we can kind of squash everything down or make it bigger. We can type a number of channels into there. So I want to see 10 channels, or I want to see 20 if there is 20, and very handy. So that's widths and heights. That's quite obvious, really. Here's a button that appears to deal with, this is channel linking. Again, this is another thing that you could kind of use if you wanted to. Let's just go back. I'm sorry, because we're in live stream mode here. So yeah, I should probably just quickly show you how this works. So earlier I showed you holding the Alt key will give you, if we've made a group, let's leave it at link 1 again. So I showed you that I can move everything together, or I can move an individual piece with the Alt key. But what we can also do here is we can suspend the linking. So at the moment, everything will be separate. I'm not holding down any of the keys. I'm just I've got basically the whole thing suspended, but they are still in that group, which is quite handy. Again, another thing you could put on a key command. And absolute mode forces all parameters to be the same. So you wouldn't want to use this very often. You sort of watch what happens as soon as I move this fader. They've all gone to the same value, which is really not what I wanted. But once in a while, you might find that handy. Okay, so we're going to remove that link again, and I'll just have a quick play of the music, make sure we're still in. Okay, double check the zooming here, and we're off. So that's widths and heights that we've just looked at. The next one we've got is the functions menu. So we'll have a quick look at that. There's quite a number of things on here. You can see, hopefully you can see that. I think it's just dropping off the edge of the screen, so we need to move over. Copy the first selected channel settings. Well, that's pretty obvious. We can select a whole channel and we can basically copy it to another channel. What else have we got that might be useful? That one is useful there. To the control room queue channels, if you're using queues, you can either deactivate it, or you can in fact send your queue levels to, set them to as the mixer is at the time. Hope that makes sense. After listen fader mode, yeah, we don't need to worry about that right now. I'm going to show you a bit about that in a while. EQ filters, well, I like to have it on soft, but you could try quick if you fancy it. And that's just the way that the transitions are between the filters. Global meter settings. Again, I don't think we're seeing all that. I'm going to have to move over a little bit here. Yeah. Global meter settings, can we see that? Yeah, so we've got the meter type. We've got the peaks, which again speak for themselves. And we've got the meter position, which at the moment is post fader, which is your kind of normal, your normal way. Although you may want to use post panner, or you may want to use input, depending on how you want to see the meters. All right, so that's a little quick walkthrough of the separate toolbar items. And I know I skipped through a couple of those. If we didn't. If we didn't skip through some of them, we would have a 4-hour live stream. And I know people, don't like to have these great big live streams, although it is something I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about doing a stream which would involve starting with a blank slate and putting a whole project and song together and just leaving it running for the day. But we'll talk about that another time. So let's move into the next item, which is the 3 zones. So like I said, at the moment, we've got a very basic mixer setup. We've got the faders and we've got the rack in the middle and the inputs and outputs at the top. I'm going to go to that in detail as well. But the other thing that we haven't shown yet is the zones on the left and right. So left zone over here, this is the center zone, main mixer, and then the right zone. So the left and right zone give us some options, and used often, they can be left on the display on each individual mixer if you want. So you might find it handy to leave one of these open. And I'm tempted to start on here, but let's start from the left and move across. So here's the left zone. Hopefully that's nice and clear. I've got it as big as I can on the screen. I don't think it could really be much bigger. Maybe we can just zoom, do that. There's no point in really. Right, so we've got top and bottom tabs. So it's important to notice that whatever we look at here, there could be tabs at the bottom. In the history there isn't, in snapshots there isn't, but in visibility we have bottom tabs, and of course the same thing applies to the right zone. So we're going to start off with the and the other thing I wanted to mention is the history tab. I'm going to skip that now. We'll look at it right at the end. Okay. So first thing I'd like to look at is the Snapshots tab. Now I said earlier that we were going to, when we were on the toolbar, I said we were going to look at that later. And there's a reason for that, is because it ties in with the left zone. So how do snapshots work? Great for comparing mixes, but bear in mind that the snapshots item is not for saving visibility. That is what this area is for that we looked at earlier on, right? So this area is, remember, we looked at this a little bit earlier. This is for your actual channel visibility. Snapshots are going to save a specific, levels and EQs and so on. So let's just have a quick example of that. So we've got the mix at the moment doing whatever it's doing. It's probably going to be all over the place now. All right, so I've made a few little adjustments there. You probably can't really, you don't really need to hear that much of it because it's not about listening today, like I said. But then what we do is we just literally save. Oh, actually, we'll save that. We can double click it and we can say more cowbell, even though there isn't actually a cowbell in this track. And then what we could do, we'll just use the history. We'll go back to before I did any of that. Somewhere up here. Yeah. Again, I'm going to show you history at the end, but, not to worry for the moment. We're looking at the snapshot. So I'm making another snapshot now. And we'll call that as it was. Now you can see what I'm getting at here. You can see how powerful this is going to be, right? So let's play. So as you can see, I got a little message there warning me about, certain things. Let's go back to as it was. Recalling a MixConsole snapshot will delete any insert automation. So we haven't got any insert automation. Doesn't matter. Like to leave these messages on though, just in case. And as you can see, bang, everything's set back to how it was. So you can try some quite, drastic things there. Or if you're at the stage where you're kind of really happy with the mix, good idea to take a snapshot of it, because then you can always revert. Spelling mistake, which is what I should have done. I should have done a snapshot before I tried to show you how that works. But hey, it's live, and that's the way things go. So that's how snapshots recall works. And again, you can make notes on these as well. This was done with no IQ whatsoever. Yep. Yeah, you get the point. So you've got your little mix notes as well there. We can go back to more cowbell. And there's no notes. We go back to as it was. Oh yeah, look, this was done with no IQ whatsoever, which is often the case with me. And there we are, back to how we were. Right, so that's snapshots. The other thing which I'd like to quickly show you here is the syncing area, which is over here. So we'll go back out to the full project, and this is to do with the visibility. So actually not really visibility, it's more like it says here actually sync the visibility of the project and the mix console. I don't know if I'd call it entirely visibility, but anyway, you can see that I've got the full screen. I know it's not zoomed in. I know it might be a little bit tricky to see, but if I select a piano over here at the moment, whoops, you can see that we've now got the piano channel selected. If I choose to select the drums snare, you can see that the project is following whatever I select. It's not showing you those because they're actually all hidden, but the basic stuff is there. Drums bounce, that's the audio, you can see, and you can see over here that it's following that. We can also actually sync the mix consoles themselves together. I don't like to do that because I like to have separate control over each mixer so that they are all basically behaving like separate mixers. Right, okay, so we've done snapshots. Now let's move to visibility. This is extremely useful. So I showed you about the channel visibility configurations up here, which, you know, presets can be made and VSTI, etc., etc. Let's just go back to all. So on this left zone, and this is the one you'll see probably people using more than anything, we have the visibility tab. So you can select channels individually here. Again, you can see the ones that are actually relevant or the ones that are visible on the screen. Let's put this back into zoom mode. I do apologize. Ones that are visible on the screen, you can see that they're in sync with the mixer. And you can see there's some things unticked here. So we can tick those. Those are all my various inputs. Now, notice that on the mixer below, we have kind of these little dividing lines here. And at the moment, I've got 4 of my inputs, but the rear 6 and 7 input are kind of included in this group. And I don't want that. I want them to be over here with the rest of the outputs. So we go to zones, and you can see there's your channels again. And what I'm going to do is click them. We've got the 3 zones, the left, the middle, and the right. This is of the actual mixer display, not the 1, 2, 3 zones. This is the zones of the actual mix console, the center zone. So it's the 3 zones of the center zone. Not to worry. I know that might sound a little bit confusing, but I'm sure you're getting the idea here. Again, a few of you will already know this, but it's super, super handy to organize the way you're seeing things. So as you can see, I've got my input channels on the left. If I move, let's say I take my Townsend Sphere input and move him, you can see the channels moved over here. If I move it to the right, you can see it's moved over there. What I like to do is have my outputs on the right, my actual channels in the middle, and my inputs on the left. So we'll do that. And there you have it. So we'll move back to the channel tab. So the other thing is that all these little tick boxes here mean that you can actually hide particular channels or entire parts of, channels. So let's get rid of all the inputs. We just do that. There's no inputs anymore, which is really handy. Excuse me. Put the output back on. And there you have it. So that's how channels and zones work. Really worth looking into. And again, let's see, we'll put only the audio on the mixer right now. And as you can see, it's all tied together with this. So if you have this open when you're making these choices, you can figure out, again, the rear. The reason that those 2 are showing every time is because I added them after I made this configuration. So what I would need to do is do that. I don't want input channels showing. I only want audio channels showing. So now I just go and I will update that configuration. And next time I select it, we'll go back to all. We'll go back to audio, and you'll see that none of those input or output channels are there. In fact, I do want the outputs. So we'll put those back on. We'll put the zones in the right place. Like this. Go back to channels, get rid of those, and once again, update. Okay, so that's visibility. What have we got next? Well, we've done snapshots, we've done syncing. I've still got the mixer nicely zoomed in. I just want to make sure that you can still see. So let's have a quick look at the right zone. I'm skipping the center zone because that's the biggie, right? So we're going to really go into that in a minute. So the right zone, we've got top and bottom tabs, same thing. Basically, in the right zone, you can show your control room, which is handy. I have mine also on a key command so that I can show the whole thing over on the right of the screen. So I don't use this too often. So you've got your control room, the main section. Don't forget to look at the tabs at the bottom, and the insert section of your control room. And also we can show a global meter with various settings. The loudness settings, really useful. Again, even if you're actually showing, again, we'll zoom out here. If you're showing your entire control room, like I do have over on the right, always have that open pretty much. That's one of the benefits of working on a big 4K screen, is that you can have things kind of moving around like this. And it doesn't interfere because you've still got loads of space. But handy to also be able to see, for example, overall loudness. And overall loudness being extremely much too loud at the moment, but never mind. Right, let's zoom back in and move on. Right, so that's the right zone and the left zone. I hope we've gone into enough detail there. I highly encourage you to have a play around, especially with the visibility and zones on the left side. We'll get rid of the right zone for now. In fact, we can get rid of the left as well. Once again, you can set key commands up on these. So you can see at the moment I'm using the mouse, but I also have my key commands which enable me to, get rid of those, turn them on and off super quick. So we are going to go back to looking at all channels, and we're going to move into the all-important center zone. All right. So once again, I know it's confusing, and it's partly probably my terminology, but this is the center zone of the mixer. But we're going to start from the bottom and move upwards, and I hope you're following with me. I hope this isn't going to be, too boring. I suppose the thing with this is there's not much music to play, which kind of means you're just listening to my voice. But I'm kind of looking at this as a reference that will hopefully live on, a bit of a legacy, one of those kind of things. I hope, anyway. And the reason for that is I don't actually see any kind of tutorials or guides on the entire mixer and what everything does. And even if you look at the online manual, it's very short and quick. It doesn't kind of show you too many practical ways of using things. So let's carry on. Camera off. You don't want to see the back of my head. And off we go. So starting at the bottom, at the very bottom of the center area of the mixer. It's not the center area now because we've turned off the left and right zones, but we'll still refer to it as the center area. The very bottom, we have the actual channel names. Now, okay, that's obvious, but again, it's one of those things you might not realize. Let's flick over to audio only, and we've got the channel names. We can double click them, and we can actually rename from there as well if we wanted to. I'm not going to because they're already kind of named how I wanted them. So we can do naming, but we can also do coloring from here as well. So we can change that to green. Let's go over here and change him to a light blue and so on, and the drum bounce to whatever color you would call that. Who knows? And of course, the right-click options, of which there are many. Some of these, I think we will probably leave till a little bit later on. But one particular one, apart from, okay, so you're not going to be able to see the bottom of that menu. We'll save that until later on, the metering, because I'm going to show you that when we get to the Dolby Atmos thing in a little while. One of the most useful I find here, again, we can do the link selected channels thing. We can do adding channels. We can do adding and taking away. We can do various things, copying, pasting. But one thing that I think is very important that a lot of people don't know about. All right, so you know how groups work, right? So a group is like a sub bus, I suppose you would call it. Very useful, and something that if you've not used it, you need to use it, because this answers a lot of questions. We get questions on the forum all the time about, okay, so I've got drums, bass, and a guitar, but I can't, how do I put a compressor over all of them together, or how do I EQ them together? And of course, the answer is you sum them together and you put them into, or I've got two mono tracks. How do I make them stereo? Well, you put them into a stereo group, and then you can use a stereo plugin on them. So it's like a bus. It's like a sub bus. So, all right. So let's get rid of the camera again. Okay. So I'm going to show groups here as well as the audio. So those are my existing groups. Once again, we move over and we can put those into the right zones. So we've got audio, we'll move the audio to the left. We get rid of inputs. Whoops. Yeah, I've got the wrong thing selected there. All right, so we've got audio, we've got main outs. And what we do is we make sure the audio is on the left this time, just for the sake of this demonstration. Gosh, I'm messing this up. There we are. There's the group tracks. Right. And once again, I need to get rid of these extraneous input channels. So, okay, I've got my groups here already. But, okay, let's say we wanted to make a group for the drums, the bass, and the guitars. So we can select those channels. And what we can do is right-click, add group channel to selected channels. You can see I've got a key command here for that. So if I do that now, it's going to make a group. We'll call it new group in nice big capital letters with a single exclamation mark. Never use more than one. Add track, and bam, off we have it. And if we look at the routing now, you can see that those three channels, those three tracks, have all now been routed to the new group that we created. So it's kind of done it all for us. Instead of having to create the group first and then assign them, it's done it for us, which is magic. I'm going to undo that because we've already got the group set up how we want them. So just, yeah. All right. So that's one of my favorite little features on the right-click menu. There's quite a few others. Once again, although I'm doing a comprehensive walkthrough here, there are a few things that I think, you know, we will have to skip. So next thing I'd like to look at is the kind of middle section here below the toolbar. Just make sure this is, yeah, there we are. And at the moment, all right, so we can turn off the channel and rack. So you've got a blank screen there. So you've got faders and you've got a blank screen. Just before we move on, actually, we need to look at the actual fader section, don't we? Well, that's, you know, that's pretty straightforward. They're faders. What more do you need to know? Solo, mute, listen. Listen is handy. So let's say so if we solo the drums in the group, for example, that's great, but what if I want to listen while we're still, as you can see, I can still hear the tracks underneath, and the listen volume is set in the control room. All right, so we're into the middle section, as I like to call it. And what we do is we'll look at the basic parts, and then we'll go into the kind of more meat and potatoes parts of the middle section. So over here, you saw this earlier. Again, we need to drag the mixer over because the menu goes out to the right, because I've got the mixer in the center of the screen. And you can see the setup window layout. Earlier on, we looked at these two, the right and left zone. But we also have these other sections here. So channel overview, well, that's pretty straightforward. We can basically, that shows you, if you can see here, I've turned that on. That gives you an overview of all the individual channels and what's going on. So, and if we also play, you can see the meters there as well, the channel overview. Quite useful, especially once again when you end up with hundreds of channels. All right, so let's leave that off. The meter bridge, well, again, you know what a meter bridge is, I presume. It's basically a replication of the meters at the bottom. So that's the meter bridge. We'll get rid of that. We also have a equalizer curve, which is showing you basically if you've done any EQ on a particular track. So once again, let's add some quick EQ there, and you can see that that's being affected. The curve itself is being showing you, the EQ curve. And you can imagine you have a lot of EQs, and the other nice thing is you can actually physically move that. You can have a quick look at it and then just deal with it very quickly and then get out of it. Quite handy, and again, an often overlooked feature. Next, we have the channel racks, which, as I said, we'll get to in a minute because they are more kind of meat and potatoes. Track pictures, well, track pictures, again, maybe one of those things that you don't often use. As you can see, you can just add from a selection of pictures, or you can in fact use your own. I don't think, I've got a few here from back in the old days when I occasionally use them. I don't use them very often, but some people find them very handy. That's track pictures. And let's just get rid of track pictures. Oh, well, add the notepad underneath. There you go. My dog stepped on a bee. And big one here is the channel latency. I think this is very useful. It's something that I tend to leave on most of the time. Let's put this back over so you can see. All right, so we've turned channel latency on. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. We've turned channel latency on. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to show you the latency that's being created by whatever plugins you happen to have on that channel. So you can see there's something there, 21.3 milliseconds, and that's an effects channel, and that is the UAD EMT140. It's showing you that 21.3 milliseconds of latency is being added by that. Of course, it is being compensated for. So it's not really a worry, but it's just handy to know. There's a Neo Big Al, which is 0.7. So if we were to add, for example, let's just quickly, don't look too much at this screen because, it's not, we're going to go to that in a second. We've added another plugin there. We've still got 0.7. Oops, hang on. Let's do it. Find something that's a little bit bigger. There you go. All right, so now you can see that's gone up to 2 milliseconds for the total channel latency. And if you click the little arrow there, you can actually see, again, we have to move over, don't we? You can actually see the individual plugins and the latency that they are creating. Right. So we will turn all those off for now. You can leave any number of these on, of course, at any point, but it just makes the whole screen get a bit cluttered. So it's something that you might find useful to, have key commands, for example, so you can turn things on and off. I like to have the channel overview on when things start to get a little bit more built up. But other than that, I don't really worry. Oh, and the channel latency I have on all the time. Right, so let's move in to the all-important middle section. So this is the meat and potatoes, as it were, the all-important section of the mixer. And although we've been rushing through now, I'm very aware of the time. We need to spend a little bit of time on this one and go into it in a little bit of detail. So let's do that right now. All right, so the center section, which we will call the channel racks here, or we will recall the channel racks. And there's quite a lot of this. So here we go. So we've got all the different, what they call rack areas here. And before we do move on to that, you can see I'm clicking each section and it will expand and collapse. And what I've done is, well, let's see, where's the setting for this? Oh, I always lose this. Here we are. You can change the number of slots to a fixed number. You can link the racks to the actual configuration, which is actually what I always have. And the other thing I always have is exclusive expanded rack. Now, what does that mean? Again, it's tiny and it's up in the corner, so we need to quickly move over. There we are, exclusive expanded rack. Well, watch the difference. If I turn that off and we look at routing, and then we look at EQ, you can see if I scroll up and down the mixer that the routing has stayed open. If I look at inserts, the inserts are there, the routing's there, the EQ's there, and it just gets, again, a little bit too cluttered for me. So what I like to do is, oh, I've lost it again. Exclusive expanded rack. What that basically means is that you can only ever have one section expanded at a time. So it's really useful because it just keeps things. It's another one of those things that helps you keep things a little bit organized. So let's start at the top. So the routing section. Well, we know what that does already to a degree. Let's bring in the channel filters again, turn everything off. We'll have audio and we'll have groups and instruments. In fact, no, just audio and groups. There you go. So you can see my audio channels here and my groups here. So if I now look at the routing, we can see that channel is routed to the drums and bass sum. Oh. Okay, once again, we need to go back to visibility and make sure that the zones are set up so that it kind of makes sense, right? There we go. So you'll be getting used to how this all works now. You'd think I would be, wouldn't you, by now? So let's get rid of the left zone again. So here we have our audio, here we have the groups, and if you look here, okay, we've got the drum bounce going to the drum channel. We've got the bass bounce going to the bass channel, which is there. Let's show you that. So that's drums. And then the rhythm, which is the guitars, that's going to rhythm. But on top of that, we also have the drums and bass group, which is already a group here, these two. They are being routed to another group, which is the sum of the drums and bass. And that's just something that I always do. Again, practicality of that would be, let's get rid of everything else and just have those. You get the idea. So the idea there is you can have, you know, a compressor or whatever over your drums and bass, but not over everything else, even leaving their individual configuration. And that's routing. So that's how you do that. Oh, it's one of the ways of directing one channel to another channel. So we have a pre section. Well, again, you can access that from the main EQ. But it's quite straightforward. We have a low cut and a high cut. We have a gain. So if we want to, let's again just use this drums as an example. That's the pre-gain. So again, most people will say, okay, when you're gain staging, for example, let's set the fader at 0. Far too loud. So what we can do is use the gain to bring it to kind of optimum level, if you feel like working that way. I'm not going to go into the pluses and minuses of that right now, because there are many. So high cut, low cut. Once again, you know what high cut and low cut does, but just in case. and of course a phase to flip the phase of the channel. So that's the pre-section. So next we have inserts. Let's have a quick look. All right, you saw that earlier on, that when we were looking at the latency, which I can now put back on if I can find it. There it is. And I was wondering why that guitar sounded a little bit odd, a little bit reverby. And of course, I should have looked at this latency here and realized that it was because I added this extra plugin to show how the latency works. So inserts, drop down list, we can pick an insert and off we go. So that's how you insert your plugins from the main console. So the other thing involved with inserts is just the way that it looks. So you can change the kind of visual of that. So there you go. If we move it to there, let's just expand that out a little bit as well. You can see that you've got the full title below. And if we go back, we can just kind of condense that down a little bit, which is how I prefer it, to be honest. And then the other aspect with the inserts is the ability to move a plugin. Let's find one here. Yeah, okay. So we can put him on and off there. We can bypass, and then we can also move to a post fader slot, which will be now down there. Now, that looks like it's a long way away and it could get very confusing, but we can actually move that green line. Let's try and do this. Yeah. So if you grab the green line, anything below that green line will be post fader. And if I want to move this plugin back to pre-fader, which is the normal, then you just move it there. And again, have a play around with that. It's useful for various reasons. Right. So apart from inserts, obviously the other main thing we have would be sends. We'll get to the other things in a second. So as you can see here, let's bring up the effect. Easiest way to do that, I think, would be to just use over here. Actually, no, we need to make sure you can see it here first. So we'll put that over to the right. See how you're getting, once you start using this, and I do this a lot, and I know I'm probably looking a little bit slow right now with this, but it's like I said before, it's a bit like flying an aeroplane, which is something else I do. And once you get up there, you lose a few IQ points when you're concentrating on so many aspects of things. And I always have admiration for people who do this live streaming thing and make it look so easy, because there are times when, you know, a simplest thing can just, when you think to yourself, oh, there's millions of people watching. No, there isn't. Of course there isn't. There's probably 2 or 3, which is, whoops, very nice of you. But this is what happens. You forget things. You want everything to be perfect. And of course, it often isn't. So, effects. So here's my effects channel. What I've got here, again, we're not talking about how to create channels and so on here. We're just talking about how it works. So I've got an effects channel, which has got an EMT 140 in it as an insert, which makes it an effects channel. There's the latency again that we looked at earlier. Now, if I go to my sends, that is how I will send to that channel. So you can see EMT 140, and you can change that, but usually you would have them, you know, that would be your next one. And once again, you can also choose a few options here. So we can let's see what would be important. Send the destination gain and send controls. You could maybe have a look at those. So just to quickly explain, in case you haven't come across this, I'm sure you will have. So there's another aspect of the sends that I want to get to, which we'll probably, I think, deal with. Yeah, we'll leave that until we get to the channel editor, I think. Yeah, but what I'm going to do is just quickly open that up and show you. We're going to get to this as the last section, but that's your basic send. So that's how that works, that sends. All right, so what else have we got? Let's put this back down a little bit. So the EQ section, again, pretty straightforward. You've got a curve there that's showing you, again, I showed you earlier on how you can zoom in on that and, you know, use it. There's also ways of adjusting any EQ that you've made or making new adjustments. And we can just fiddle about with the EQ. So that's pretty straightforward. It's quite a large section. And once again, I don't think this is something that many people will actually use in the rack, but it's handy to have it there. Strip. Let's have a look at strip. Well, the strip is Steinberg's built-in kind of answer to anything, really. And trust me, a lot of these plugins that are, well, would you call them plugins? A lot of these sections are actually extremely useful. So with the strip itself, you have, let's get this fade us down a little bit. We can look at this in a little bit more detail. Can we? No, we can't. Okay. So we have a built-in gate. We have a built-in compressor of various type. Obviously, there's another EQ there. And we have de-esser, an envelope shaper. Let's put the de-esser in, you can see. Really worth trying these because although I know people, you know, like to have a big collection of plugins, we all do. But the built-in Steinberg stuff is actually really useful. Magneto, you might remember Magneto from back in the day. It doesn't have its graphical interface anymore, or at least it doesn't in this section. But great stuff. And then we have an overall limiter. And once again, the brick wall limiter, really useful, really useful. So that's the strip section. Again, going into that in more detail would take us far too long. Cues, this is if you are sending a mix to a separate pair of headphones. For example, if your vocalist is in the other room and you've got a cue mix set up, you can assign volume level. So, okay, he says, I don't want much bass in my mix. So you know, this is basically a way of doing a slightly different mix for different people. And you can have any number of those. I'm not sure if there's a limit, actually. There probably is, but, you know, handy. And the other nice thing, of course, with the right-click menu here, we can either copy. So, for example, I want everything to be similar to this one. So we can copy, and we can move it here, and that'll end up with the same volume. The other thing I missed, yeah, we have a pre and a post button there, which I actually missed earlier on, didn't I? The only other thing I guess that may be useful while we're looking at the cues area, let's unsolo everything. So we've got our mix set up. Now what we do is we go over to the control room. You can see my cue amp here. This is sending to headphones into the other room. And what we can do, oops, let's move that across. Change cue send levels from selected mixer channels. So hopefully you can see that. So we can select all those particular channels and use current mix levels. Let's do that. So you can see now that they are all, we need to turn them on, but they're all set at the current levels, which is really useful. It makes you be able to set up cues very quickly, use the current pan settings, and we can actually change the send levels as well, using relative mode or not. Relative meaning that it would be relative to the actual fader. Let's just put that back, and yeah, okay. I think we'll leave that the cue section for now. All right, so direct routing again. Yeah, we're moving into kind of an area that many of you probably won't use that often, but it is handy. In addition to the main output, direct routing allows up to 7 routing destinations. And they're post fader and post panner in the signal path. This way you can switch the destinations of channels and create different mix versions in one go. So in other words, you know, we could have a vocal mix or a TV mix without the vocal and so on. And it's available for audio instruments, sampler, FX channel tracks, I think, groups and output buses. And you can also set and activate outputs for several selected channels at once. So what you do is you set up your direct outs, and then you can actually select them here as part of the mix. Again, look into that. Maybe we should do a little tutorial on how to use direct outs, because very powerful feature. VCAs, similar thing to groups. If we create a VCA channel, and let's make sure we can actually see it. We need to go here. We say OK, and then we will move the VCA channel over to the right. So that's our VCA. So we've made our VCA track called test. And what we can do now is, oh, why is that saying output? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so we can select those channels. We could have done them all at once using one of the link functions, remember? And now we have an overall control for those channels. So it's a bit like the grouping. It's a bit like making a group channel. It's just another way of controlling things all at once. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do a snapshot. Or I'm not going to do a snapshot. I'm going to recall our more cowbell snapshot and bring everything back to how it was. There you go. All right, so we're nearly there on the main section. The other area, we've got the quick controls here, which we could look at another time, and the panel, which MIDI Device Manager allows you to build device maps complete with control panels, including all the parameters, and you can put those in there. All right, as far as I know, actually that is a section that I have never used. So, you know, it's one of those things, maybe you guys can put in the comments, tell me how you use that section. So I think we're on to the final bit now. So like I was saying earlier, it was difficult to decide how to do this because there's so many features that rely on other features. So do you do it a feature at a time, or, you know, so anyway, I elected to do it this way because it kind of helps my workflow as well, you know, moving across and moving down. So we're now onto the kind of magnifying glass of the channel, as it were, which is, let me see, what would you call it on the edit channel settings area. You'll have seen this a lot, so let's move on. So the edit channel settings, let's once again look at the drum channel here, and it's the E button. Okay, so we're going to hit that button, and you can see we've got a great big expanded window with lots of information. So we're going to go from the far right of the toolbar again, And once again, this gives you the option to turn certain things on and off. We can go through all those, but there's probably not much need. There's a way to set up presets. I don't bother with this because I just have everything on all the time. And also, while we're at it, actually, let's go back to that rhythm guitar with the sends. Yeah, I think, yeah, okay. So if we solo that, that's the guitar and the piano. So let's bring up that channel. And something I really wanted to show you here, I've done a full video on this, but just quickly, really useful. There's a little feature if you go to the functions menu here called link panners. And what that does is if we pan, let's say, actually you wouldn't use it on a group, you'd probably more likely use it on an individual instrument. If we pan that particular channel over to one side and we've got link panners on, the actual send would also be panned. Now you have to have a plugin or a reverb or whatever that can accept stereo input. So it's a different thing to, let's say, you know, if I were to go to this EMT and just pan it to the left. But that's the effect you would get at the moment, except for you wouldn't, because this is not a stereo pannable plugin. And if you moved the whole channel to the right, you would get that effect, and so on and so forth. So that is panning sends, and again, that's the best way I find to turn it on and off. To link panners, just leave it on most of the time. I don't ever need to touch that. All right, so top section from left to right. Well, we've got the usual. We've got navigation here, so we can move around the channels. We can move from one to the next MixConsole channel, and so on. We can search, like we did in the main mixer itself. Here we have the input, which is showing two sources. It's actually just telling you that there's two sources to this particular track because it's the drums and bass sum. If we move to, let's go to a standard channel there, there's no source. If we move to the drums, there's 8 sources because we've got, that is the sum of all those different outputs from the drums. That's the name of the channel. And of course, the output it's showing you is the drums and bass sum. So let's go to this channel again. So this is our drums bus. So this is the group that has all the drums are being sent to, and then they are going to go, as you can see earlier, to the drums and bass sum. So if we open up here, and if we put show output chain, again, takes up a lot of space, but super useful. You can now see that's the channel, and that's where it's going. Yeah? And of course, then off to the outputs itself. So that's that. And then, of course, we have the ability to load track presets. So you would click here, let's say load a preset. I can't move that window. Oh, yeah, you can now. And there's all my presets there. If I wanted to choose a particular item, that would be nice. So if I'm particularly happy with the sound of that after I've done all this crazy EQ and added plugins, we will go to save track preset, and then we can load that back in at another time. So, all right, over to the left again, now that we've done the kind of top row. Few things here. Yep, similar to what you saw earlier on, deactivating all mutes and all solos. again, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You realize that these menus exist, but if you said to me, can you quickly deactivate all the solos, I would, all right, so we've got that, that, and that. I would have probably just gone up to there and done it, and then opened this back up again, or brought it back. But there you go. This is the thing with Nuendo and Cubase, is that the same features are available in so many different areas. You can choose which one works best for you. Right, so inserts. Well, we've already seen let's find a track with an insert on it. There we have one. So if we do a quick look at that, you can see that the insert is showing on this area. So you can, in fact, do all your work from just within this screen. Once again, you've got the ability for presets and routing. There's the strip. You can change the EQ position. So again, I have mine after the gate. Some people would like to have it after saturation and so on, or after the compressor, but I like to have my EQ after the gate in case I do use the Steinberg channel strip. So that's inserts. Changing the EQ positions we've done. Then you've got your sends and the Q sends, which we've also seen earlier on. So when we made that Q mix, this was the same thing as looking over here at the Qs. So okay, let's pick one with a Q open, and you can see there, that's the Q, and it's showing you that. And the same thing, of course, for the sends. Let's go to EMT. We'll enable that, and if we look again over here now, whoops, you can see there it's replicating itself. It's showing you the info in fine detail. So I skipped out the EQ section because there's a couple of things I just wanted to show you on the main EQ. So first of all, we have settings here, and we can change the overall display of the EQ. We can change it to buttons or sliders. I like to have sliders, but many people I know like to work with knobs. Don't forget we have the pre section here as well, which you have to enable, and the little power buttons there, which is the same thing that I showed you earlier on in the pre section. Oops, yeah, there you go. We should probably have some audio playing, shouldn't we, so that you can actually hear what's going on here. So let's get that rhythm guitar part again. And just play. So that's the pre-section, and of course the fact that you can actually add now a fast Fourier transform graph to that. Let's just see if that's how that looks. Okay, one sec. I just need to reset again here because things seem to have gone a bit skew-if. Right, let's get that. Let's try again. There we go. There you go. You can obviously turn those EQ curves on and off, and it'll show you, and you can also hold it as well. Right, so obviously EQ, yeah, we've got 4 sections that we can control. We've got the controls for them below. We've also got phase. And one of the nice things here, again, I didn't want to go into the, all the super obvious things, but one of the nice things that exists that a lot of people don't actually see is the channel comparison. So let us, once again, clear everything off. We've got our drums bounce and let's say our bass. No, actually, let's use the guitar bounce there because we want something that's sort of different. Actually, bass and drums, bass and drums. So we're going to look at the bass channel while we're listening to the guitars. Obviously, you can hear by the EQ that I've already done, these are quite separate. And there was method to my madness there, because what I want to do is show you channel comparison. So you can see here, it's already activated the channel that we're working on, which is the bass bounce. And now, if we drop down here on the right, we can go to guitars bounce. Okay. Now, if you can see behind the bass, you can see the EQ curve of the guitars. So as you can see, that will be quite handy for subtle adjustments. Activate or deactivate. Obviously, this doesn't affect the sound at all. This just affects the display. So if we leave it on, you can see. Bypass we can do, which will obviously gets rid of the EQ altogether, and we can also load and save presets on the EQ as we can with any other things. All right, so we're almost there. We're almost there. Actually two little things I just really wanted to point out before we wrap up, to be honest. So yeah, that's really handy. If you have, for instance, I don't know, something that's similar, maybe, let's have a look at the drums and the bass. We can reset that. Reset that. And no comparison channel. Let's go to the bounced drums. Once again, clear everything off. And so we got drums and bass. So now if we go to our bass bounce, what we can see here is the kick down at the bottom. And we can play around with the EQ there. Again, now is not the time because we've been here too long already. But we can play around with the EQ and see visually, as well as, of course, using your ears, we can see if there are any kind of obvious clashes. Now, there's plugins that will help you to deal with that as well, but it's just handy to have that, and it's an often overlooked feature. Right, so we have a couple of other things I want to look through before we finish up. I'm going to get rid of all the channels, and I'm just going to show you the MIDI channels. If I now create a MIDI channel, let's just make a test MIDI channel. You'll see it's come up here. You'll see that the fader is down at 0 and the panner is off to the left. So this is the only thing I wanted to show you really that's relevant here, is do not confuse MIDI channels with audio channels, because if you start to mess around with this, it's going to obviously affect whatever your MIDI instrument is putting out. And it can be really confusing. So this is why I tend to have them hidden most of the time. Now, if we go back to what we were looking at earlier on, the instrument channels, and this is why the nice thing about instrument channels is that the fader and the panner are actually, although the instrument channel itself is MIDI, as you know, we can zoom out there and we can look at the MIDI and make sure that channel's selected, you can see. But what we have is a normal audio style fader. So there's none of that confusion sending volume, controller CC7 or whatever it happens to be to your MIDI instrument by accident. Okay, so one more thing I want to quickly show, and I'm going to have to just bring up the project. There we are. Yeah. All right, so this is a Dolby Atmos project, and these are Dolby Atmos objects. I'm not going to go into that. There's another video all about that. What I want to quickly show you is that the default setting, which we normally use for the mixer, which would be global meter settings, would normally be on post fader. Sorry, on post panner. Which means that you'll see level differences. We'll go back to that in a second. But if we have post panner for Dolby Atmos, for objects, you can see that you're not actually seeing anything. You will see. Let's put everything on all channel types. You will see some things. 1 second. Do apologize. Right, we don't need. There we go. All right. But most of the tracks you won't see a level. So we go to global meter settings. There we are, and we will change post panner to post fader, and now. Obviously, there's some instruments that weren't playing there, but now you can see everything. Obviously, the panning won't be relevant, but at least you can see levels when you're looking at Dolby Atmos groups. So, okay, this brings me to one last thing. We'll go back to our MixConsole project. I need to activate it. Won't take a second, just bear with me. There's one other thing that I realized just now that I've omitted. So let's just activate this project back again. Have a quick sip of water. And all right, so you'll notice here, let's go back to just showing groups, which we already are. And we'll just do the drums and bass sum again. There it is. So you'll notice that I have the combined panner. So these are the alternatives. The normal balance panner is what you will normally see and what you've probably kind of got used to using. So that's literally just a balance control, and that's kind of your standard panning scenario, but I actually don't ever use that. I use the stereo combined panner. I find it much more flexible, and what this gives you is a separate positioning for the left and right channel. So we've got our drums and bass, and you can hear some phasing going on there because I've got a live drums and a MIDI drums playing at the same time, but don't worry about that. But drums and bass, okay, so we want the drums and bass to be more central. Imagine it's a stereo bass, which it isn't, but imagine it is. You can just kind of do this. Okay, so we want a live band scenario where we maybe have the drummer, is sat slightly, and not that this would be particularly realistic, but we have the drummer sat slightly over there, the bass player is kind of there, and so on and so forth. So I find that really useful. Right, let's get the camera back on, and I think we're almost at the end. Yeah, okay. So I think we'll leave it there. I know there's probably some things that I've missed, maybe out of the time that we've been, my goodness, we've been on quite a long time. Hopefully out of the time that we've been on, excuse me, that there will be some of that time as giving you something new to look at in the Mix Console. I've enjoyed it tonight and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks everybody for joining us, by the way. Good to see some familiar faces. And thanks for the nice words. We'll speak soon. All the best, super mega large. Thanks a lot. Bye.